I woke up inside a toxic romance novel as the villainous husband. My wife, a high-powered soul named Ava Harrison, told me she had found her one true love. She claimed she was willing to leave with absolutely nothing, move into a run-down apartment in the slums, and live on instant noodles just to get away from me. I didn't hesitate for a second before signing those divorce papers. I managed to scoop up every single asset under her name while putting on a performance of utter devastation. I told her that I respected her choice to pursue her first love and that she should go without a worry because I would reluctantly endure the burden of living in her mansion and maintain her fleet of luxury cars with tears in my eyes. I even offered to shoulder the heavy responsibility of spending that $1 million monthly allowance all by myself. When I first opened my eyes in this world, I was sitting at a glitzy gala. The lights were shimmering and the room was packed with people. I stared blankly at my surroundings for good, while before things finally started to click. I quickly ran through the plot of the book in my head. My character's name was James Sterling, and he had been childhood sweethearts with the protagonist, Ava Harrison. 2 years ago, James had used some shady tactics to force Ava into marrying him. Naturally, Ava despised him from that day forward, constantly using business trips as an excuse to stay away from home for months at a time. Eventually, she met her true love, Ethan Brooks, and decided she was ready to toss her entire fortune aside for him. She was determined to divorce me, even if it meant living in poverty and eating cheap noodles. In the original story, James refused to let go and spent all his time sabotaging her new boyfriend until he eventually died penniless and alone on the street. Honestly, the original James was an absolute idiot. Before the divorce, my wife was never home, meaning I got to live in a mansion and drive supercars with $1 million monthly allowance. After the divorce, I was set to inherit billions of dollars in assets, transforming me into one of the wealthiest men in the country overnight. This was essentially winning the cosmic lottery. I really had to thank my lucky stars for this windfall. I turned my head and saw Ava Harrison standing in the center of a large crowd, looking regal and stunningly beautiful. Every gesture she made seemed to radiate the intoxicating scent of pure wealth. I absolutely loved it. Once the gala ended, Ava and I got into the car together, the silence in the cabin broken only by the hum of the engine. I glanced down at my bank balance on my phone and felt my spirits soar like a rocket. I had only been receiving this allowance for 6 months, meaning I already had $6 million sitting in my account. Even though James came from the wealthy Sterling family, he was nothing compared to his 2 overachieving brothers. He was just a spoiled brat who didn't know the first thing about business, and his share of the inheritance was a mere pittance. The one with the real money was Ava. I had to bite down on my tie to keep from laughing out loud and ruining my heartbroken facade. Suddenly, a loud thud echoed through the night. I poked my head out the window and saw a figure sprawled out on the pavement. It hit me instantly that this was the pivotal moment in the book where Ava was supposed to meet Ethan Brooks. They were destined to fall in love at first sight and descend into a mad obsession. Ava would eventually give up her entire inheritance and be kicked out of the Harrison family with nothing just to be with him. I have seen plenty of love-struck women, but Ava's level of delusion was truly in a league of its own. Even Juliet would have to take notes from her on how to be self-sacrificial. Our driver panicked and jumped out to check on the person. I turned to Ava, who still had her eyes closed, and asked if she wanted to go see what happened. Ava opened her eyes slowly, her gaze as cold as a frozen lake. I felt a shiver run down my spine because her presence was incredibly intimidating. Before I could say anything else, the driver ran back to the car, pale-faced, and reported that the man was badly hurt. Ava calmly told the driver to call 911. In the original story, I was supposed to follow her to the hospital and get jealous when I noticed her falling for Ethan, which would lead me to start plotting his demise. Luckily, I arrived in this world early enough to fix that mistake. I put on a thoughtful expression and told her to handle the situation while I grabbed an Uber home. I didn't even wait for her to reply before I hopped out of the car. Even when Ava wasn't traveling, she rarely came back to our house since she owned dozens of properties across the city. I slept in until noon the next day, using high-end imported juice just to rinse my mouth before sitting down for a decadent 5-course lunch. I went on an absolute shopping spree that afternoon, swiping my credit card until my wrist actually started to ache. It was painful to spend so much, but then I remembered that another $1 million was about to hit my account. My life was great, but I knew it all depended on Ava. I needed to check on how the romance between Ava and Ethan was progressing to see if they were already head over heels for each other. If the sparks weren't flying yet, I was fully prepared to step in and play matchmaker just to speed up the divorce process. At the hospital, I peeked through the small window in the room door. Ava was holding a bowl of soup and basically forcing Ethan to eat. I remembered this part of the book where he was being stubborn about eating, so she had to take charge. I wondered if my own morals would plummet even lower than hers once I was a single billionaire living it up. Ava pulled back and glared at the man in the bed. She asked him if he was going to eat on his own or if she needed to keep spoon-feeding him. Ethan started coughing, his face turning bright red, yet he still stubbornly looked away from her. He looked so pathetic that I almost felt bad for him for about 2 seconds. Before long, Ava reached out and gripped his chin firmly. Their eyes locked, and the tension between them was so thick you could practically taste the dopamine in the air. I was thrilled, so I quietly closed the door to give them some privacy. Later that evening, Ava called me. She told me that her father wanted us over for dinner at the Harrison estate. I agreed and headed over, arriving before she did. I made myself comfortable in the living room, snacking on some fruit while I waited. I heard someone coming down the stairs and looked up to see Mrs. Diana Harrison. She wasn't Ava's mother, but rather the second wife of Ava's father, Robert Harrison. She approached me with a fake, polite smile that didn't quite reach her cold eyes. She asked me if people were still calling me a gold digger behind my back. Diana hated the fact that I was living off her stepdaughter, and she never missed a chance to take a jab at me. I honestly couldn't care less. Being a trophy husband is a skill, and plenty of guys would kill for my lifestyle. I just laughed and told her it was a blessing to have such a successful wife. Diana was clearly caught off guard by my response, and her smile faltered. Usually, the original James would have thrown a tantrum and insisted he wasn't a moocher, but I just shrugged it off. She had no idea that I was a completely different person now. I didn't care about dignity or true love. I was only interested in the high life. A few minutes later, Ava arrived with her father, Robert, and dinner was served. When I saw the spread on the table, I nearly wept with joy at how luxurious it was. There were giant lobsters flown in from Australia, Italian white truffles, and mounds of caviar alongside dishes I couldn't even identify. The ultra-wealthy really knew how to live. I decided right then and there to eat my fill of everything I had never tried before. I started devouring the food like I hadn't eaten in weeks. Ava watched me with such a look of disgust that her forehead was permanently creased. I looked up and told her that if she found me so repulsive, she should definitely make sure she never fell in love with me. Once Robert and Diana left for their evening walk, I turned to Ava and her cold, beautiful face. I casually asked her when my allowance would be coming in. She gave me a look like I had grown a second head. In her mind, the old James never cared about money because he was obsessively focused on their love. He thought talking about cash was beneath him. But that was the old him. I loved money, and I wanted it to rain down on me from every direction. Ava told me coldly that she didn't bother herself with such trivial amounts of money and that I should talk to her assistant. I nodded, whipped out my phone, and sent an iMessage to her secretary. Within minutes, a notification flashed on my screen. The message confirmed that my $1 million had been deposited. I smiled, feeling perfectly content. As we sat in the lounge, Robert started dropping not-so-subtle hints about us finally having a baby to carry on the Harrison name. Ava ignored him entirely, but I decided to play along like a professional actor. I told him with a wide grin that we would definitely get to work on that immediately. Ava shot me a look of pure loathing and glared at me with enough heat to melt steel. Robert insisted that we stay the night at the estate since he knew Ava rarely went back to our place. He was clearly trying to force us into some quality time for his grand plan. There was no way I was going to actually have a kid with her. Once we were alone, Ava told me point blank that she would never have a child with me. I raised my hand and swore right then and there that I had zero interest in her in that way. She looked like she didn't believe a word of it. She scoffed and headed upstairs without another word. A little later, I walked past her room after my shower and heard her on a FaceTime call. Ethan Brooks was telling her that her father had offered him $80 million to dump her. Ethan sounded so wounded as he talked about how insulting the offer was. Ava was absolutely livid at her father's meddling. My eyes widened at the mention of $80 million, and I practically had to wipe the drool from my chin. $80 million was a life-changing amount of money. I wondered if Robert would be willing to insult me with a check like that. I told myself to be patient because once the divorce went through, her multi-billion-dollar fortune would be all mine anyway. I couldn't even fathom the level of joy I would feel as a billionaire. The next morning, Robert woke me up early for some exercise. I hated mornings, and sleeping on the guest room sofa had left my back and neck feeling like lead. After some light stretching, Robert finally got to the real reason he called me. He mentioned that Ava had been seen with another man and told me I needed to step up. He couldn't pay Ethan off and didn't want to use brute force, so he was pressuring me to sabotage their relationship. I was screaming internally because I didn't want to be the villain in their little drama. This was supposed to be their love story, so why was I the one doing the dirty work? I knew they would end up together anyway. I nodded solemnly, while secretly hoping they would hurry up and run off into the sunset. Green was such a vibrant color, and I was happy to wear it if it meant getting paid. Ava didn't come home for lunch, so Robert insisted I deliver some homemade chicken soup to her office. I played the part of the devoted husband and headed to her headquarters with a thermos in hand. When I walked in her office, I saw Ethan standing there clutching his hand and looking like he was in pain. It hit me that this was the scene where James was supposed to throw hot water on him. I had a terrible feeling about this and tried to back out slowly. Ava suddenly rushed past me and nearly knocked me over. She grabbed Ethan's red, blistered hand and asked him what happened. He told her that he had accidentally burned himself. Ava spun around and looked at me with pure rage in her eyes. She told me that if I ever touched him again, she would make my life a living hell. I had to admit, she looked pretty formidable in that moment. I tried to tell her it wasn't me, but she didn't even let me finish before she slapped me across the face. She shouted that since we were the only two in the room, it obviously had to be my fault. I was furious, but I swallowed my pride when I thought about her bank account. I told myself that enduring a little slap now would lead to a mountain of gold later. Ava continued to threaten me with a vicious tone. She told me she would make me pay if anything happened to Ethan's hand. I was speechless because it was just a tiny burn and he was acting like he had lost a limb. She told me to shut up and raised her hand to hit me a second time. I stepped back to dodge her, and someone suddenly caught her wrist. I looked over and saw a beautiful woman standing there. It was Hannah Harrison, Ava's half-sister and the secondary female character from the book. While Ava was the hard-working heir to the family fortune, Hannah was the complete opposite. She spent all her time partying and enjoying the finer things in life. The two had hated each other since they were kids, and the tension between them now was palpable. Ethan finally spoke up and told Ava that he had burned himself and that it wasn't my fault. I wanted to roll my eyes so hard they would get stuck in the back of my head. Ethan was such a coward for waiting until after I got slapped to tell the truth. My face was stinging and I felt completely cheated. Ava didn't even bother to apologize before she grabbed Ethan's hand and walked out of the room. Hannah looked at me and asked if I was going to go after them. She had definitely heard about how obsessed I supposedly was with her sister. I just walked over to the window and stared out at the city skyline with a dramatic sigh. I told her that after giving Ava everything, her coldness had finally broken my heart. I claimed that I was exhausted and that I simply didn't love her anymore. The room went silent, and I noticed Hannah staring at me like a predator eyeing its next meal. I wondered if she was actually developing feelings for me, which seemed pretty desperate. When Ava eventually came back, she found me happily eating a chicken leg. The chicken soup was delicious, and I felt like it would have been a waste to give it to her. Ava asked me who gave me permission to eat in her office, but I ignored her and finished every last drop of the soup. I was about to leave when she told me to stop. She looked me in the eye and said she didn't love me and that our marriage had been a mistake. I had to force myself not to cheer as I thanked every ancestor I ever had. I asked her if she was absolutely certain about wanting a divorce. She nodded and said that you couldn't force attraction. She had found her soulmate and wanted to spend the rest of her life with Ethan. When I didn't say anything, she probably thought I was going to put up a fight. I held up a hand to stop her and asked where the papers were. My voice was actually shaking with excitement as I asked for the documents. Ava looked surprised by my cooperation, but didn't question it. She said she would have the papers drafted immediately. Just as she was speaking, someone burst in screaming that her father had suffered another heart attack. Robert Harrison had collapsed and was clutching his chest in agony. Ava turned and ran to him immediately. My smile vanished, and I felt like I was on a nauseating emotional roller coaster. Robert's heart condition was well known, and the news of the divorce had clearly triggered an attack. Once he was stabilized with his medication, he started screaming at Ava. He asked her if she had any idea what she was doing with her life. He couldn't believe she was throwing away her marriage for some random guy. Ava argued that Ethan was like a beacon of light in her dark, structured life. Robert was so angry that he smashed a glass on the floor and told her that her poetic nonsense about her first love was garbage. I ducked to the side to avoid getting hit by flying glass. Ava started crying about how she had been raised to be a corporate drone without any freedom. She claimed she would rather be a normal person than live under his rules. She said she just wanted to be free and follow her heart. I thought she was being incredibly ungrateful. Most people would give anything to live the life of luxury she was currently complaining about. Her idea of a restricted life was a dream for everyone else. Ava looked at Robert with determination and told him she was leaving the marriage, even if it meant giving up every penny she had. Hearing her say she would leave with nothing was like music to my ears. Robert was shaking with rage as he told her to get out of his sight. As Ava walked away, I hurried over to comfort her father. I told him not to let his anger get the best of him. Robert pulled a black card out of his wallet and handed it to me. He told me he knew I had been through a lot and that I should go buy myself something nice. I told him I couldn't bear to leave him, though I really meant I couldn't bear to leave his money. If he gave me a few more of those cards, I would happily endure any amount of emotional abuse. Robert was dead set against the divorce, but Ava was determined to be with Ethan. I was more than happy to let it happen. I just wanted her massive fortune to be dumped into my lap as quickly as possible. I was surprised when Ethan asked to meet me in private. I didn't want any trouble, so I turned him down immediately. He wouldn't take no for an answer and showed up right on my doorstep. As soon as he saw me, he dropped to his knees and started crying. He promised me that he would break up with Ava for my sake. I was absolutely baffled because the last thing I wanted was for them to stay together. I actually wanted them to stay together forever. His dramatic kneeling made it look like I was the villain bullying him. If Ava saw us like this, she would definitely assume I was harassing him. I told him to get up, but he refused to move until I promised him something. I had no idea what he wanted. All I wanted was for the divorce to go through so I could move on with my life. I just want to get my money and stay as far away from them as possible. Right then, Ava showed up looking furious. I jumped back immediately and checked my face, expecting another slap as she started shouting at me. She demanded to know what I had done to him. Ethan finally acted like a man and told her that he was the one who insisted on kneeling. He claimed he was begging me not to divorce her because he didn't want her to live a life of poverty with him. Ava pulled him into a hug and told him she would endure anything just to be by his side. I had to bite my lip to keep from laughing because her dialogue sounded like something out of a terrible soap opera. Ethan looked at her with such intense devotion it made me feel a bit sick. He tried to speak, but Ava cut him off and pulled a set of documents from her bag. She told me it was time for us to finally get the divorce over with. I practically sprinted to the car and held the door open for her. I told her to hurry up because I didn't want to waste another second. Ava looked completely shocked by how enthusiastic I was to sign the papers. The three of us went to the county clerk's office together. The people working there gave me such pitiful looks because it wasn't every day a man brought his wife and her boyfriend to sign divorce papers. I didn't care because I knew I was about to become incredibly wealthy. True to her word, Ava transferred every single one of her assets to me. She was left with only $200 in cash. I felt a tiny pang of guilt, so I reached into my pocket and gave her an extra $10 just to be nice. I put on my best heartbroken face and told her that I supported her quest for love. I promised her that I would bravely face the burden of living in her mansion and driving her supercars alone. I didn't wait for her to respond before I walked away. Once I was safely in the car, I looked at the divorce papers and felt like crying tears of joy. It had been such a long journey to get to this point. I snapped a photo of the document and posted it on Facebook. I captioned the photo about how hard my life had been. Within minutes, the comments were flooded with people calling me a loser and a gold digger. They said I was an embarrassment to the Sterling family, but I couldn't have cared less. None of those people understood how happy I was to be a single billionaire. After we finished the paperwork, Ava resigned as CEO and moved into a cramped apartment with Ethan. They spent their days working minimum wage jobs and eating cheap noodles. I was genuinely impressed by Ava's commitment to her drama. Even for someone blinded by love, her actions were extreme. Robert Harrison was heartbroken and told her that he wanted to see exactly how long she would last without the Harrison family's money. Our marriage had been a strategic alliance between our families, so the Sterling family was furious when they heard about the divorce. My parents and brothers took turns blowing up the family group chat to tell me what a failure I was. They said I was worthless and that since Ava had dumped me, I had no value left to the family. They demanded that I go beg her for forgiveness on my knees. I eventually got tired of their constant harassment. James had never felt a single bit of love from his family. Their house was only ever about money and power. His parents never saw him as a son, but rather as a tool they could use to get what they wanted. I kicked every single one of them out of the group chat and then blocked their numbers when they tried to call me. Finally, the world was quiet. I felt a huge sense of relief. It was lucky they didn't know I had inherited Ava's entire fortune, or they would be at my door trying to take it. I decided it was the perfect time to leave the country for a little vacation. I didn't want to deal with them once they realized I was a billionaire. I'm a man of action, so I threw together a quick itinerary and booked a flight to a private tropical island in the Maldives. I spent my days on the beach surrounded by beautiful women and sunshine, which felt like the absolute peak of my life. I finally felt like I was being rewarded for all the stress. A few days later, I spotted someone I knew in the crowd. I couldn't believe my luck. I had just divorced Ava, and now I was running into her sister, Hannah Harrison, on a remote island. She spotted me, took off her sunglasses, and marched right over to where I was sitting. She mocked me for being on vacation instead of begging her sister to take me back. I asked her why I would ever do that when I had a massive bank account and plenty of expensive wine to enjoy. I even whistled at a beautiful girl walking past just to annoy her. I told her I was far too busy enjoying my life to worry about romance. I told her I hoped her sister and Ethan had a house full of kids. Hannah stared at me like I was mentally ill and tried to feel my forehead to see if I had a fever. I just shrugged and told her that the divorce was final and I had the money, so there was no point in acting like I was still in love. Hannah eventually asked me if the rumors were true about Ava transferring all her assets to me. I looked at her with a hint of suspicion because she had a reputation for being greedy. I wondered if she was after my new fortune. I tried to act like it wasn't a big deal. I admitted that she had given me some money, but claimed it was nothing compared to the overall Harrison family wealth. I quickly changed the subject and asked her if she was also on the island for a vacation. Hannah smiled and reminded me that I used to just call her by her first name. I was confused because I couldn't remember James ever having a close relationship with her in the original plot. I wondered if I had missed some chapters or if the plot was changing because of my actions. Since this was my first time in a book world, I wasn't sure what to expect. Hannah seemed to have very unique tastes. Robert Harrison had tried to keep the divorce quiet to save face, but the rumor mill was already spinning. Everyone in the city thought I was a pathetic loser who had been dumped by my powerful wife. They had no idea that I was having the time of my life spending my new fortune. I didn't care about my reputation at all. I asked Hannah if she had followed me to the island. Hannah gave me a smirk and told me that she actually owned the entire island. I was stunned as I looked around at the luxury resorts and restaurants. I had no idea she was this successful. I realized that she must be making a fortune from this place. It turned out she wasn't the airhead the book made her out to be. I gave her a big smile and asked if she would treat me to dinner. Since she owned the place, I figured I could probably eat for free for the rest of my trip. It felt like I had won the lottery twice in 1 week. She took me to the most exclusive restaurant on the island. The menu was entirely in English, and although I knew the letters, I couldn't make sense of the fancy culinary terms. I watched as Hannah ordered several dishes with perfect confidence. The original James was supposed to be a genius with languages, and I didn't want to blow my cover. I just pointed at random items on the menu and hoped for the best. Eventually, Hannah's food started arriving. My side of the table remained empty while she enjoyed a delicious-looking steak. The smell was driving me crazy. I finally complained to the waiter about how slow the service was. I called the waiter over and asked where my dinner was. He gave me a polite smile and informed me that the 4 piano solos I had accidentally ordered had already been performed by the restaurant's pianist. I was mortified. I wanted the ground to open up and swallow me whole. I forced a smile and told Hannah that I had ordered the music specifically to entertain her during the meal. I asked her if she had enjoyed the performance. Hannah didn't even call me out on my lie. She just told the waiter to bring me another set of everything she had ordered. She even pushed her soup over to me, so I wouldn't be sitting there with an empty plate. I started to like her a lot more in that moment, because she was so much nicer than Ava. As we ate, a beautiful woman at the next table kept flirting with me. I ran a hand through my hair and thought about how irresistible I was. Hannah noticed the other woman looking at me and gave me a sharp kick under the table to get me to stop flirting back. After dinner, I went back to my room and fell into a deep sleep. I was woken up in the middle of the night by someone at the door. I assumed it was room service, but when I opened the door, a woman threw herself into my arms. It was Hannah. She told me she was terrified because of the storm outside. Right on cue, a massive bolt of thunder shook the entire building, making her story perfectly believable. Her sudden boldness was more frightening than the storm. She asked if she could stay the night in my room. I felt a bit nervous about it and told her I didn't think it was a good idea. She was as clever as a fox, and I had no idea what she was really planning. I was fine with some flirting, but I wasn't going to let anyone near my bank account. She ignored my hesitation and walked right into my suite. She argued that since I was no longer married to her sister, there was no reason we couldn't share a bed. I closed the door and jokingly asked her if she actually had a crush on me. Hannah went quiet for a moment before calling me an idiot for not realizing it sooner. She grabbed my ear and forced me to listen. She revealed that she was the one who had saved my life years ago after I fell from a cliff, not Ava. I suddenly remembered the backstory from the novel. James Sterling had been obsessed with Ava because he thought she was the one who had saved him when they were kids. It turned out that Hannah had been the one watching over him all along. Hannah had been in love with James since they were teenagers, but he had been too blinded by Ava to notice. She had kept her feelings hidden for years and only decided to make a move once she knew the marriage was finally over. We spent another 2 weeks on the island before deciding to travel around Europe together. We went on massive shopping sprees and ate at the best restaurants in every city. We ended up being the perfect travel partners. By the end of our trip, we were officially a couple. Hannah Harrison was the complete opposite of her sister. She might have seemed like a spoiled brat on the surface, but she was actually very thoughtful and caring. Being with her made my life so much easier. When we eventually returned home after 3 months, Hannah insisted on going to the Harrison estate to announce our relationship. We walked in and found Ava sitting on the sofa in the lounge. Ava was dressed in a sharp business suit and looked as professional as ever. I had read in the news that she had already started a new tech company. She really was a resilient protagonist who could bounce back from anything. She was like a force of nature that couldn't be stopped. I was certain she would be a billionaire again in no time. Robert Harrison had finally given up on stopping her from being with Ethan since she was so set on it. Ava's face went pale when she saw me holding Hannah's hand. She demanded to know what was going on between us. I knew she despised her stepmother, Diana Harrison, and had always hated Hannah by extension. The two sisters had never gotten along. I told her that our relationship was exactly what it looked like. Ava sneered and claimed that I was only dating Hannah to get back at her for the divorce. I felt Hannah's hand tighten in mine, so I squeezed back to reassure her. I stepped forward and told Ava that she was incredibly narcissistic to think everything was about her. I told her that I had worked hard to win Hannah over and that she wasn't some tool for revenge. I made it clear that I was with Hannah because I actually loved her and that Ava wasn't even a factor in my decision. I told her to stop acting like the world revolved around her. Since we were divorced, she had no right to tell me who I could date. Ava looked shocked by my bluntness. She probably expected me to still be pining for her and begging for a second chance. In her mind, I was still the same pathetic man who would do anything for her. She couldn't handle the fact that I was moving on and protecting her sister. I realized that James had been so obsessed with her that she simply couldn't comprehend a version of him that didn't worship her. I ignored her and led Hannah toward the kitchen to see what was for dinner. Hannah whispered to me and asked if I really was over her sister. She looked so worried that I couldn't help but smile. I ruffled her hair and told her that she was the only one for me. Hannah blushed and gave me a sweet, shy smile. Robert Harrison was actually thrilled about us being together. He thought it was great that the family wealth was staying within the inner circle. He even joked that I was still his son-in-law in a way. I couldn't believe his bizarre logic, but at least he wasn't angry. Diana, on the other hand, was furious and accused me of being a gold digger on her daughter. She demanded that Hannah end things with me right there. Hannah refused and decided to play her trump card. She placed a hand on her stomach and told her mother that she was already pregnant with my child. I was absolutely speechless because I knew it wasn't true yet. I was shocked because we hadn't even gone that far yet. Diana went pale when she heard the news and realized she couldn't do anything about it. She finally went quiet and stopped complaining. Ava looked miserable for the rest of the night, as if I was the one who had betrayed her. It was ridiculous because I was the one who had supported her relationship with Ethan and taken all the heat for the divorce. I didn't expect her to be happy for me, but her hateful glares were starting to ruin my appetite. She looked at me like I was her worst enemy. Robert was overjoyed at the idea of being a grandfather and told me I could start working at the Harrison headquarters the next day. I figured it was a good idea since I needed something to occupy my time. As Hannah and I were leaving, Ava called out my name. I felt a surge of anxiety because I was worried she was going to ask for her money back. I slowly turned around and asked her what she wanted. She told me she needed to speak with me in private. Hannah sensed the tension and told me she would wait in the car. Once we were alone, Ava asked if I was actually serious about her sister. I told her that I never played games when it came to relationships. She sneered and told me that I was moving incredibly fast. I knew what she was implying. She and Ethan Brooks were supposed to be the great love story of the century, yet they still hadn't gotten married. Meanwhile, I'd already moved on and supposedly had a baby on the way. I told her that in a few years my kid would be old enough to run errands while she was still dating Ethan. The fake smile on her face vanished and her eyes went cold. She told me that I was a completely different person now. I felt a bit nervous about her figuring me out, so I just joked and asked if she missed me constantly following her around like a puppy. Ava told me to remember my place and to stop thinking about her. I assured her that she was nothing more than a memory to me now. I checked my watch and told her I had to get going. I walked back to the car and buckled my seatbelt. Hannah asked me what the conversation was about. I leaned over and kissed her, telling her that Ava was just being bitter and jealous of our happiness. When we got home, I asked Hannah how she planned to hide the fact that she wasn't actually pregnant. Robert might be easy to trick, but her mother was definitely going to notice eventually. Hannah gave me a mischievous smile and suggested we just make the lie a reality. She pulled me close and kissed me passionately. I didn't hesitate to pull her into my arms and kiss her back. We had a massive wedding 2 months later with hundreds of guests in attendance. Ava was there, but she didn't look happy or sad. I honestly didn't care what was going through her mind at that point. She and Ethan Brooks still had a long way to go before they could get married, and I had already moved on. I was certain it killed her that I had found happiness and stability before she did. During the reception, Ava Hannah leaned in and whispered that she was actually pregnant this time. I was so excited that I picked her up and spun her around. I was finally going to be a father. The best thing about my new life wasn't the money, but finally realizing who actually cared about me. Ava thought she was winning by following her heart, but Hannah was the one who truly stood by me. I ended up with the fortune, the freedom, and a woman who actually loved me for who I was. Don't waste your heart on someone who doesn't deserve it. There are some people you will never be able to win over no matter how hard you try. But then there are those who have been standing right behind you, waiting for you to notice them all these years.